Can machines think? See, we ask ourselves questions all the time, we ask others questions all the time, but now man has created a machine where it feels as if it's thinking, it feels as if it's generating a response, just as if someone was giving us that response, except it's not actually real. Now, what led to this creation? See, if we go all the way back to the dawn of human time, man has invented many machines. The first ever noted machine that was created was called the Antikythera mechanism. I'm not sure if I said that 100% correct, but it was made by the ancient Greeks, and it was basically an analog computer. And this analog computer was essentially used to help predict the movement of stars and eclipses, as well as a few other things. And over the centuries, man has created many sophisticated machines, from trains to planes, and eventually the first digital computer. This computer was called the ENIAC machine, and it was created in 1945. It had one job, which was to basically calculate artillery firing tables for the US Army in World War II. Now, this digital computer was the first machine that was programmable. It was run on zeros and ones, which is binary code, which means even though it was serving a particular purpose, which was helping the US calculate artillery firing tables, it could be programmed to serve a different purpose. And that was essentially the birth of software. Fast forward all the way to today, and now we have very sophisticated software known as AI. AI can do a whole range of different things. It can generate your CV, it can help you with writing and sketching out a video, it can help you with generating an image and some artwork, it can carry out many different functions. So when you ask an AI a question like ChatGPT, is it thinking when it generates its response? It certainly seems like it, but it's not thinking in the way like a human does. It's not generating a response like a human does. So if it's not doing that, what is it actually doing? Every time you ask ChatGPT or any other AI model a question, it's not thinking in the same way you and I do. Essentially, every time you ask it a question, it's basically predicting word by word the most likely response it should give you based on the vast amount of data that it's been trained on. And it does this using something called parameters, and you can think of these as essentially dials. Imagine a humongous number such as 175 billion parameters or 175 billion dials. Each one of these dials is connected to a word, a thought, an idea, or some sort of representation of something. Now, every time you ask a question, all of these dials get adjusted, they all get configured to generate a response to you, word by word. In a way, those dials are its brain, and the more parameters there are, aka the more dials there are, the bigger the brain, the more sophisticated and the more intelligent the model generally is. But with these AI models, they're not conscious, they're not self-aware, but it seems as if they are. They are responsive, and it sounds like they understand. The best way to think about this is, if you look at a plane, it can fly. If you look at a bird, it can also fly. Now, a plane doesn't fly the same way a bird does. It doesn't flap its wings, it uses a jet engine. However, it carries out the same purpose. It gets someone up in the air. So even though the mechanics are different between a bird and a plane, it still ends up with the same result, which is flight. I think it's the same for these AI models. It doesn't think exactly how we think, but it is thinking to some degree. There is intelligence involved. It may arrive to the same conclusion or the same answer as someone else with this different mechanism, but it still arrives to that conclusion. It's essentially thinking in a different kind of way. It's important to note as well that someone tuned these dials, someone set these configurations, which is why sometimes ChatGPT or any other AI model, it gives you certain responses for some kind of questions, but it doesn't give you the responses you want for other more so ridiculous questions. For example, if you ask, hey, can you rob a bank? It's not going to give you a detailed step-by-step plan on how to do that because it goes against the instructions that it was programmed on. See, me and you, we also have dials as well. Not physical ones, but internal ones. We've been shaped by the experiences we've had ever since we came into this world, by the people that were around us, by the experiences that we've had, by the information that we've consumed and the content that we've consumed on the internet. All of these things, they shaped our beliefs, our values, our way of thinking, our biases. Essentially, the collection of those elements was the training data used to train our minds, to train our way of thinking. Essentially, we can see that collection of information, collection of elements as training data. It programs how we see the world and how we interact with it. So if our way of thinking was shaped by information we received ever since we were a kid, and all an AI model is trained on information, what if you take the information about someone and you use that to train an AI model? Do you think it could learn how that person thinks, how that person communicates, their values, their beliefs, the experiences that they've had? Now, to illustrate this, I'm going to cover this famous test called the Turing test, which was created by Alan Turing. Now, if you don't know who Alan Turing is, he was essentially one of the founding fathers of modern computing. It's a very simple concept. So imagine you are having a conversation with two different entities. One's a machine and one's a human. You ask a question and you get a response from both of these. However, you aren't told which is a machine and which is a human. And if the responses that you get from both entities are indistinguishable from one another, meaning you can't tell which is which, you can't tell which one's a machine, which one was generated by a human, then essentially it's passed the Turing test. Now imagine you're staring at a screen and there's a chat window. You've got chat A and chat B. And then you type a question into this chat and you get a reply. But let's say chat A was your friend and chat B was an AI model trained to be like your friend, but you couldn't tell which was which. And you received a response from both of them and you couldn't tell which one was your friend and which one was the AI model. It's hard to believe that you could be in a situation where you can't tell the difference between an AI and someone that you know. But that is the future that we are moving towards, where what if you could train and model to think and talk exactly like you? That's essentially what I spent the last 1.5 years trying to do, and I've tried many different methods, but the main one that seems to make this actually happen is going to be fine-tuning. So if I go back to what I said earlier about how all these different dials work, how all these parameters work, fine-tuning is basically where you take a model that already exists, you take a data set, that data set, let's say, is of someone, how they communicate, how they think, how they speak, and then using this data, you essentially tune these dials, you tweak these dials so that it matches the output of the data that you've given it, aka it matches the person itself. It matches how that person speaks, talks, communicates, and thinks. So it definitely sounds crazy, it definitely sounds like an out-of-the-box and new idea, but it's where the future is going, and in other videos I'll explain more about why you'd maybe even want to talk to an AI version of someone. So to summarize, can machines think? Absolutely, I think they can think, just not in the same way that we humans think. They don't have feelings, they don't have doubt, they don't have many of the other functions that we have as humans, but they can arrive to the same conclusion as a human using a slightly different kind of way of thinking. And by the way, if you're new to this channel, my name is Jay Suchanya, and I'm essentially trying to prove this concept of creating an AI version of someone by creating an AI version of myself, which I've called J.AI, which I've also called the name of this channel. Anyways, thank you for watching. If you want to follow along, feel free to subscribe. There's also a link below for J.AI, which is just a basic form to fill out if that's something that you're interested in. Else, just continue watching the videos and stay tuned.